Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bright Lights, our weekly podcast about the world of achievers and achievements in all fields of human endeavors. Coming to you live from our studio here in North Minneapolis. This evening, I'm very excited about our guest here, a business associate and friend I've known for a while, Mr. Frederick Blockton. Fred is president of one of the local at one of the local computer companies here called Up, UpNet Technologies, and we'll get into that as soon as I bring Fred on here shortly in a few minutes. In the meantime, remember to go out and hit the like buttons and subscribe buttons and notification buttons and donate to the podcast. Visit our online store. We got nice little souvenirs. I like to hold up my little cup here, but we got nice ones out here, bright lights. But okay, so before we bring Fred on, as is my custom, spend a few minutes here talking about some things that's happened in the news today during the week. I guess two things that come to mind, a lot of things, but I focus on, first of all, Georgia beat Alabama in the college football playoffs. So they're national champs now. They had a second shot at them. Also in the news, was the death of actor Sidney Poitier. Now, I bring those two things up because of this. Uh, a lot of people nowadays, they don't understand that when the era I grew up in during the civil rights movement, Alabama for a while was an all-white uh, players football team. The Southeast Conference was not recruiting black players, and so if you look back in history, you'll find a lot of the upper Midwest, northern colleges being football champions and things because they were going down recruiting black athletes. And what really turned the tide in college football, well, one of the major events was when USC with Sam the Bam Cunningham went down and played Alabama. They beat them pretty bad. And some people think that that was the biggest event as far as stimulating the integration of the southern colleges down there. But what I like to two things, points I'd like to make. One is that when I was growing up, people don't realize this. We very seldom saw uh, actors of color either on TV or in the news, and so that has changed quite a bit during our lifetime. And then the other thing that always stick out to me is that the Georgia quarterback, no one expected for him to be a top recruit and go to a top program. And just seeing the interaction between the different players, white, black, color didn't matter. Just seeing the camaraderie, the hugging and things among the coaches and things. And it took too long to get there. And I always had the feeling that there was a lot of people who wanted to do the right thing and promote diversity, but takes a lot of courage to go against the social norms. And then a lot of time that's what was going on, and they just needed some people to do that. And I guess the whole summary of this is that a lot of times, and I just believe that you don't judge someone by where they are, but you judge them by how far they've come. I think that's a better judge of people. And a lot of times I think we're hard on ourselves as a country because we don't look at how far we've come. We tend to focus on where we at. And that's my 2 cents worth there. Congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs for being national champions. We've come a long way since the old days where none of the Southeastern Conference would even recruit black players, and now they're almost exclusively black. And I think that's a good indication of the type of country that we are. So I'll leave it there and bring on my guest for this evening, Mr. Frederick Blockton. Hey, Frederick, welcome to Bright Lights. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you as well, Lacey. Hey, good to see your face. Good to see and hear your voice.
Same here, man. And we do have some history that the audience will probably glean from our interview here. Let me make sure my phone is off and I don't get interrupted by a phone ring. Okay, so Frederick, we go back for a while. I know a little bit about you. We talked a little bit. Let me just tell my audience this, and just don't blush on me, Frederick. Frederick, I think I met him through the Richburgs. I think at the time you were vice president of Keystone Computer Solutions, and I just noticed the energy that this young man have. I noticed the way other people reacted to him, professionals and friends, and he just seemed like the type of person that just would make a great friend. I told him I surmised that he grew up with some sisters around him because he tend to know how to get along with ladies, and really, and I'm not saying this from any type of sexist standpoint, but if you grow up with a lot of sisters, you just learn, I think, how to get along with women a lot better, and I've seen Fred have that. So, but we're not going to focus on that. Let's focus on your achievement in life, where you came from, your family background, the influences in your life. So let's just first talk about where you're from, Frederick, and the family you grew up in, and we'll get into some of the things, your dreams when you were a child, and I sense that you was kind of like a brainy little smart guy growing up, and you got a reputation for that, and we'll talk about that shortly too. So just give us some background of where you grew up at and the type of family, and your motivations in life and things like that.
Sure. Yep. So I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, right? Pensacola is on the west coast of Florida, for those of you that don't know, but that's not the most important part. I actually started out in an all-black elementary school. Pensacola was very segregated at the time, but I had a strong mother and family, makeup. And one of the things that we were taught very young is that, it's all about you and not anybody else, right? So you might, end up in a community, but even though you're in that community, it's still all about you and your drive. And we were taught that at a very young age. We started to understand things. So baseline, I grew up in Pensacola, but my grandmother and my great grandmother all had property in Snow Hill, Alabama, right? And so we basically grew up on the farms there because we spent our summers there. We spent a lot of time traveling there. It was only like 2.5 hours away from Pensacola, but we had a structure and we were always working. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a time we wasn't working or hustling to make something happen. And I'll tell you just a funny one. When we were very young, Lacey, we raised pigs and chickens, and we had all kinds of stuff. We had a slaughterhouse, all that stuff. But my grandmother would buy us pigs when we were young,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't a wealthy family by no means, but this is the way we ate, right? By raising our own food. And so, but every year she would say, "Hey, to me and my two sisters," and you talk about my two sisters. I have a older sister and a younger sister. My older sister is Sylvia. My younger sister is Marie, and they're have been very influential in my life and success, right? But so my grandmother would say, "Hey, you guys, you get a pig, right? And then so Christmas is coming up, so you got these many months, right, to raise this pig, and then by November, late November, we're going to sell the pig, and then that's how you're going to have your Christmas money, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Teaching us about economics and all of those things, right? So we remember now we lived in Pensacola, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we'd be bugging the heck out of our mom, right? Mom, we got to go feed the pigs. We you know,
Because this is your Christmas money.
we
Yeah,
we
this
were
is your
serious about
investment.
economics. We were serious
Right.
about economics at a very young age because we had a goal in mind, which is buying these Christmas gifts for ourselves, right? You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that really taught us, that was the structure that we were built upon, which was you don't sit back and wait on people to do anything for you. You really got to make and pave your own way, right? And that's what our grandmother, taught us for, right out of the chute, right? And then we had to maintain it, and we had to be aware of what was going on with it. And it wasn't, if anything happened to the pig, it wasn't her fault, it was ours, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Responsibility was taught at a very young age about, all of this stuff, right? So I don't know.
Well, you mentioned two things there. First of all, about you, and that's the same way I was raised. Is that you? It's about you being the best person you can be and being the best at what you do. And then the word work. I think those are two very key things that values that is established in us at a very young age that take has taken me through life. And I think you hit on the theme of self responsibility and accountability. I like that, and we're going to get into another area, but I have to share this. We too would have pigs, but uh, either to sell or to butcher. And as a young kid, little pigs are kind of cute when they're little, and you kind of fall in love with them, but sooner or later they're going to be on somebody's plate. So I'm still getting over some of that trauma as an adult. I really like hearing that. And I mention all the time, Fred, if I had to do it all over again, I might just have raised my children and my family on a farm, because there's some values as far as getting up, working, and everything else that I really, really like that we're missing in the cities. And I was telling someone, in fact, my wife and I was talking about it today. When I look at my young grandson, and I realize that most of the time when he's playing with these children, he don't know any of them. And I was telling her, I don't ever remember the time in my life where I was playing with a group of children and I didn't know every one of them I was playing with, number
Right.
one. And then I see the time that they spend inside. Growing up down south, especially males, we weren't allowed in the house hardly
At
ever. We had
all.
to be outside. And to
Right.
see our young men nowadays shut up in these homes and watching TVs and video games and things like that, and playing with kids they don't know, who threaten to take them out and things like that. Anyway, good background there, Fred. So you grow up in a family. You got two sisters. They probably spoiling you as the only male and the middle child and middle son and all that good stuff. But I hinted on it earlier. I suspect you were pretty good students and you had dreams and goals and things while you were going through school. Why don't you tell us about that? Your childhood goals and dreams, and
Sure.
how good of a student you were, and how serious you took homework and those type of things.
Yep. So I don't know that I was a great student, right? But because I was a daydreamer, right?
Hmm.
And I always thought about what I could be, and even in situations in classes, when I was in class, when we talked about things around education and structure, my mind was somewhere else building stuff, right? But what I was really good at in school was math, right? I really understood math, and I really understood physics as well, how things were, kind of put together. And because I always wanted to tear stuff apart, right?
Hmm.
So from that aspect, but when it came to like, writing and, all of that stuff, it bored the heck out of me, right? Our
Hmm.
lecture, it just sit still, kind of bored me. But what happened is I was able to get myself through high school, but in my junior and senior year, I ended up in this program called DCT, right? And
Hmm.
what that did was it allowed me to, and I had enough credits,
Hmm.
by the grace of God, to start going and working in my junior and senior year. I go to school from 8 till like 11 o'clock. And then at 11 o'clock, I was able to go work at this company called Dell Champs, right? And it
Hmm.
was kind of a work school program. And I ended up being the president of DCT, for our area, just by, I always I always wanted to be in charge, right?
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
what I mean? I
No.
was, even when I was in Sunday school at church, I wanted to be in charge. I ended up being the youngest treasurer in our church, Lutheran church, in history, right? Because I wanted to be in charge of something, and I've always been that way. So through high school, um, I focused a lot, like I said, on math and structural things, right? And then I ended up in DCT, which gave me more of a business acumen at a very young age. At the age of 14, I was able to start at this Delshamps company, right? And learn a lot about, how products are moved and how they're bought and how they're sold and, how they're managed inside of a grocery store. So I had all of these different positions. And even before I graduated high school, Delshamps wanted me to come to work for them out of high school as a manager, right? But my grandmother was like, everyone in our family was going to be educated after high school, period. Right? So all of my cousins, sisters, everyone below my grandmother is educated.
Wow.
in our family, and so that was a thing. Like, I wanted to go to Delshamps to go into their management program, which I thought at that time was very, fiduciary. It was like, hey, this looks good. My grandma was like, what? Are you serious? You guys, school was very important in our family, and everyone in my family has graduated from some either junior or major college in history. So, but anyway, so from an education standpoint, yeah, it was important to me. I never skipped a day in high school until senior skip day, right?
And
But
I remember senior day. I got suspended once from K through 12, and it was next to the last day of graduation.
and you know, I
So I
never
know.
did, 'cause I was afraid of my mom. I was afraid of my mom. So
That's
that
it.
was
Yeah, that.
ooh-wee. So, but even going through high school, I had to be responsible. My mom had she had rules, right? Like, hey, there's no, when the lights go out, street lights go out, you had to be home. You were home. There was no
Right.
question about where you were at certain times. So in your mind, you don't realize this. I realize this now, and you do too now, is that those are structural things
Yep.
that played well into our later lives when it came to fitting into the work world or the real world situations, because
Right.
you can't break the rules.
Right. Right. And you grow up with a respect for the rules too,
Right.
and I think I like the idea, and word that we don't hear too much nowadays is just the deference to the elder people that we grew up with. To learn some
Right.
deference and how to hold your tongue and the discipline that it takes and
Mm.
things like that. So it sounds like you grew up in that environment. I heard you also mention a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned the value of education and stressing education. But you also
Yep.
mentioned the fact that, well, even though you went in there wanting to be the ruler, but you mentioned the fact even at church that you was involved in church. Tell us a little bit about that. Were you a Sunday school teacher or something like that?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
sung
I've
in the
been in,
choir or whatever. Tell me about tell me about your church experience growing up, Frederick.
yeah. So I've always been in church, right? So
Hmm.
I grew up. My mom was a AME, but this is a very interesting story. Our neighbors across the street from us were Lutheran, right?
Hmm.
So the neighbor, they were a married couple. They didn't have kids, right? And so they took an interest in me and my younger sister. My older sister was, 4 years older, so she had moved on. She was Baptist, all that stuff, right?
Hmm.
But they ended up adopting us and taking us to Lutheran church, right?
Hmm.
So I ended up growing up Lutheran um, throughout my high school, my young and adult life, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then my neighbor across the street ended up becoming my godfather, and
Hmm.
his wife becoming my godmother, right?
Hmm.
So I've always been in church, and so as I grew up and as I was involved, I got involved because my mom is always in church, and she was always involved. She was always volunteering to do stuff, so I got involved at that level as well, right? Um, and even today, coming years from there to now, I taught Sunday school in St. Paul, Minnesota for the last 12 years. with 9th through 12th graders. And before then, I worked with younger kids as well. And I still work with kids. But I'm very spiritually connected, still do church, still do my morning meditation. I'm very connected to the higher power for sure. Yep.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. To teach Sunday school, you need to know a little bit about what you're talking about there, Frederick. And I'm assuming that you have equipped yourself with the verses in the Bible very well. Uh,
Mhm.
so now you grew up in the church, AME, Lutheran. By the way, I think I've been to just about all kinds of services. And if I recall correctly, the Lutheran had a hour and a half service here.
About an
And
hour
about
at
an
the
hour,
most.
yeah, an hour, yeah. And I'm like, hey, this is not bad. We start at 11 and I'm home for the football
Out of
game.
there, out of there.
But I have to say though, growing up a Southern Baptist, I didn't quite know how to process these AME and Lutherans and Catholic folks, but got a lot of respect for them nowadays as I grew and learned them. Okay, so church played an important part. You were very good and interested in math and physics and things like that. And somewhere down the line, you decided to go to Florida Institute of Technology. What led to that decision, and what did you study, and what were you intended to do once you finished Florida
Yep.
Institute of Technology?
So it started out to be, and it was a conversation in my senior year in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my living room, in my mom's house, and we were talking about Tampa Technical Institute, which is in Tampa, Florida, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about engineering school, and I was very interested, obviously, in engineering, and we're going to be studying, forward thinking technology, electronics at the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so I ended up going and completing my degree at Tampa Technical Institute, which turned into a branch of Florida Institute of Technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up getting my computer engineering degree from there. With my computer engineering degree, I learned a lot about microchips, all that stuff. JK flip flops at the time were becoming very popular because we were looking at zeros and five votes and how we were doing ABCDs, and that stuff wasn't even real yet in 19. So I graduated from Florida Institute of Technology in 1979, right,
Okay.
with
Mm-hmm.
my degree. And I went from there to, if you want me to go on, I went from
Yeah.
there to Digital Equipment Corporation. Um, I was hired and moved back to Pensacola, Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you a great story. When I graduated from college, I had an afro and a gold tooth, right?
I want to see that picture. By the way, we gotta dig that one up. But go ahead.
But this is 1979. You got to think about this.
Right.
I'm a young black man, right? Digital Equipment. What they liked about me was, number one, my customer experience, service experience that I had, because I worked at a hospital, during my tenure in college, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
secondarily, I had a 3.8 GPA, right,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
coming out. So I understood, the technology that they were looking for me to work on, right? And so, regardless of my gold tooth and my fro, 1979, like today, people will be looking at you like, "Oh man, you got fro and a gold tooth, right?" Does he know technology? But back then, it was about your brain, right? Because everything was about what you knew, right? And so you did all these tests and evaluations. But anyway, so I ended up getting a job offer from Digital Equipment. I also got a job offer from Motorola as well down in Fort Lauderdale. But I chose Digital Equipment, because it was, where it was. My mom didn't want me to move to Pensacola. She wanted me to go to Fort Lauderdale to Motorola.
Ah, now I'm trying to remember which company. You remember the VAX computers, the VAX 1170? Was that digital or
That was
was it?
Digital Equipment
Yep, yep, yep,
Corporation.
yep, yep. I
Yeah.
remember
So
working on
we
those.
had the
Okay,
PDP-11s, we had the
right,
VAX,
right.
we had all of these major, and then we were actually the front end of GUIs, because we had these deck writers that would
Right.
speak to a lot of mainframes, and we had figured out what we look at today, which is called API, right?
Right.
But we had a hardwired API from the deck writer to these mainframes, right? It
Wow.
was,
So
yeah,
how long were you with digital? Because I think somewhere along the line in me talking with you, and I hope I don't get this wrong, you also worked offshore somewhere. Am I getting
no,
that right,
yeah, you're wrong.
Frederick? I'm right.
No,
Yeah, you're wrong. Well,
but
how
what
long
you're
were you
thinking
in
about, but no,
Yeah,
but
go
what
ahead.
you're thinking, I'll just kind of tell you
Yeah,
what you're thinking
help me
about. But
out here, Frederick.
offshore is what you're thinking about is when I worked with JDL Technologies. And
Right.
then what we did is we did the entire technology rollout and design for the U.S. Virgin Islands,
Okay,
right?
that's why. Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep,
for
yep.
K-12. So
Right.
we worked, but coming out throughout my career, what I did is once I left DEC, I went to General Electric, and
Okay.
then I was a national engineer for them, and I did data communications, all of that stuff, and then I ended up here at Control Data, right, in 1986 in Minnesota. That's where I'm now, right? But
Okay.
but there's all kinds of stuff that goes on between all of that, right? But that's good. It's all good stuff where I ended up. You
Wow.
know what I mean?
I'm learning here. I also worked for General Electric back in the 80s. I think I was in their Department of Defense Systems division, kind of top secret stuff that I have to shoot you if I told you about it. And
Yeah.
then I also worked at Control Data, both great companies, and I never knew you worked there. By the way, what did you do at GE and Control Data?
Sure. So General Electric, what I was is what they call a data communications engineer, right? So I spent a lot of time in the Shenandoah Valley training on a lot of data communication equipment. And this is before networks were really fashionable, right?
Hmm.
But what we did is we built out modem communications between buildings, right? And then what we do is we build out to the phone company so then that people could have access to data communication in their building through modems, right?
Right, right.
But we were looking at, and these companies were looking at 900 baud, right?
Right, right.
900
The
baud
bot.
right now is a character a second, right? Like
Yeah,
it's a,
yeah, 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 yeah.
but they were happy about that, right? So
Hmm.
I went around the country installing all of these major systems around data communications, right? But one of the things we started to move into was multiplexers,
Oh yeah.
which are now
Hmm.
switches and routers,
Hmm. Hmm.
through Cisco technology. But I knew a lot about all of that, so I became one of the national regional engineers for them at their level. Traveling around doing these major installations. I learned a lot. I
Right,
did,
right.
I learned a lot with them, and then moving on to Control Data, where it became so we Control Data was building out JK flip flop chips,
Hmm.
right? Which I knew a lot about, in my earlier days in college. So then I was able to land a job, and here with Control Data at a company called VTC Corporation.
Yep, I remember them.
Yep. And so we built microchips. So I was an engineer that did all the test boxes, test solutions around designs and all of that to perfect, if the design worked or not, right?
Right,
Or if there's
right,
a failure, where's the failure? What's the failure on the test equipment? All that stuff, right?
right. So, so now I was at Control Data also, and I was in that test engineering department, and this is where I'm headed with this. Well, let's come at it from this angle. When you went into the corporate world, did you have any hesitation, reservations, insecurities that you took into that world? And if so, how were you able to overcome those type of self-imposed kind of obstacles? How did you feel going into the corporate world? Did you feel prepared? Did you feel confident? Did you have any mentors to support you? Just tell me about your early experience in the corporate world, especially in a technical field, and
Right,
which is good and bad.
right,
Because if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be in trouble. But if you're
sure,
good at it, and I tell people my experience are like this: if you're good at technology, it's like being good at basketball or singing or whatever else you're good at. That people tend to want to treat you fair and keep you and hang around. But that's a long, compounded question. But tell us about your early experience and any apprehensions you may have had going into the corporate world in engineering, computer engineering.
That's a great question. Um, I don't know because I don't. When I graduated from college in '79, I was 20 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was young enough to think that the war was still real, right? So, and I had this engineering mind,
Mm-hmm.
that was clean and fresh, you know. And I can tell you this. I got to tell you my first experience, coming out of that world, right? So I get this job with Digital Equipment Corporation, right? And so I go to training, and they train me on this technology that I'm going to be going out to work on, right? And then back in those days, you couldn't just walk in and swap out boards, or you had to really know, and diagnose where the issue was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, my first service call was in Mobile, Alabama, right? 1979. Okay, gold
Mm-hmm.
tooth afro,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm done with training. So I get my first service call. So I'm driving from Pensacola to Mobile, right? Because that's my territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like bopping over there, and I'm like, okay, so get to the company. It's this big manufacturing company. They got computers, blah blah blah. And I walk in the door with my briefcase, right? And the lady goes, "May I help you?" Right? Um, and I said, "I'm here from Digital Equipment Corporation." And she said, "Hold on," right?
Uh-huh.
Because she had just seen a ghost, right? So
Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
so I mean, literally, she gets up out of her chair. She goes walking back. And back in those days, can you imagine the manufacturers? The person in charge always sat at the back with a big office and a window and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
so they
Mm-hmm.
could watch everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so she goes back to his office. I'm watching this thing, right? And I'm sure she tells me, "Hey, there's some black guy out here from Digital Equipment. He says he's from Digital Equipment Corporation, blah blah blah, right?" But and so as she's walking back to the front where I am, there's people looking out of their cubes at me at the front, right?
Mm-hmm.
So finally he comes up, and I'm like, "Hey, hey, okay, well, I understand, like, So anyway, so I go and work on their computer, Lacey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Determined that they had a bad, microchip, in their system, right? So they overnight me the microchip. I go back there. They're already hesitant about me working, on their computer and stuff. Anyway, the microchip they sent me was bad, right? So when I put the microchip in their computer, guess what happened?
It still didn't work.
It smoked.
Oh, that's even worse.
And technology smoke. It flows quickly, right? I mean, it's like everybody's like, "Oh, something on fire!" It's like, and so of course he set the computer on fire, right? So now the smoke, poof. So I'm like, no, right? So I'm going, and back then you didn't have cell phones or any of that stuff, so you had to use their phone to call. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to call my boss back in Massachusetts, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
where my boss was, right? So I told him what was going on. And he's like, "Well, just tell him the part was bad. I mean, what do that's all you can do, right?" And I did, and I actually ended up, they overnighted the part. I got it. I went back, fired the thing up. It worked. It ended up being one of our number one clients.
And I'm assuming that somewhere along in this story, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the people who were originally skeptical of you come
Became
to respect you and welcome you.
very much
And
so.
yeah, and that's generally the way it worked. I told the story when I was interviewed that my first software engineering job, they just came through a listing on my desk, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. But I said to myself, for the first 6 months, they're gonna wonder how I got this job. But once again, going back to something you mentioned earlier, it's about you. and your efforts and stuff like that. And I was like, I can put up with that for 6 months because at the end of that 6 months, I'm going to be the best in the world at this. And that was my attitude on all of this. So that's a great, great story. So you eventually moved to Minnesota
Yep.
uh, to work for Control Data. Did some great stuff with VTC, and that was the high tech division. I'm pretty much familiar with what they did over there.
Oh yeah.
And then somewhere you became acclimated. I'm assuming now you. Well, let's start here. Tell us about your current family, your current Minnesota family, and
Mhm.
we'll work backwards a little bit to find out, where you met your wife and stuff. Did you meet her
Oh
here in
yeah.
Florida, et cetera, et cetera? But tell us about your current Minnesota family, Fred.
Oh yeah. Yep. So I have
Correct.
three daughters. I
Mm-hmm.
have three daughters, Asa, Christy, and Ashley. They're top notch kids, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then my wife is Jolene, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jolene is a first responder, top notch woman about health. She's kept me healthy through these years, right? Through my medical issues. She's an RN by education, but she's in administration now, where she's helping a ton of people, especially through COVID, save their lives, right? And then my three daughters are amazing. I have one in Sarasota who works in hospitality. She's a boss in her area, and she's driving a lot of revenue for our company. And she's involved in volunteering and all of that. My second daughter, she's a graduate of Drake. She's cellist by education. She was first chair for 3 years there, and now she lives in Chicago. She teaches. She also adopted Indian dance while she was in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now she's proficient at it, and she does it professionally. So she's involved in Indian dance. She teaches Indian dance now. She also teaches piano. She's a proficient at piano. And then my youngest, who's Ashley, who's a ringer like me. So she's a driver in the technology world, where she rolls out major technology for events, and they do events through technology without having hands on. You could do it, register, take all your classes, do everything through the technology that she's designed and working with. So, from a family structure standpoint, I got, these kids are amazing. And it's given me comfort to be able to, drive, my kids the way that I was driven as a kid, right?
Right, right.
Um, they all know about education. They all know about spirituality. They all know that the world does not revolve around you,
That's
uh,
that's key. Uh-huh.
right? Unless you put yourself out there to revolve around other people, right?
Right, right, right.
So I got some great people in my life for sure.
Well, here's the thing, and everybody I've met through my association with you have been great people. They've been quality people, man. You attract
Yeah,
quality people, so that says
thank you.
something about you. Uh, Now, somewhere down the road, you met this RN to be, or maybe
Yep,
she was already. Did you meet her here in Minnesota, in Florida, or somewhere else? Was she your?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
tell me where you met her at and how both of you ended up. You came here for a job, or were you together at the time?
so listen to this. My wife and I have been married. We'll be married this June, 40 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
We dated 6 years before we were married, right? So we were just kids. So I met my wife when I was 18 and she was 17.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she helped me through college, right? Like her family, her mother, man, I would have starved in college if it hadn't been for my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eating at her house. Our mother and father adopted me, as a son to eat at their house all the time. And we grew together. And we went through a lot,
Mm-hmm.
as kids as well as adults, right? Like she helped me through college. I graduated 2 years before she graduated. Um, and she went on to Florida State to graduate, and I had already graduated and was working for other companies and stuff. But so we've always supported each other, 100% in things that we do. And she's always supported me in a lot of my endeavors that I've been in and
Right.
involved in.
Well, I think one of the keys that you said you went through a lot, and when I try to explain to people, marriage is not always about happiness. It's
Jeez,
about negotiation and endurance and going through a lot together, the
a
good
lot.
and the bad, and looking forward to bigger and better things. I think you're just making a lot of great points,
Yeah,
Frederick. Understanding that the world don't revolve around you.
right.
Uh, I just
It's
remember one of them staple singer song, "Respect Yourself,"
right,
about walking around thinking that the world owe you something because you're here.
right.
And
It
I see
doesn't.
this, yeah, this next generation is, it changes each generation. It's like
There's
they seem
there's
like the,
hope.
yeah,
There's hope.
it seems like
You
they
know,
always
one,
think the world owe them something. I
there's
just don't
hope.
get
There's
it.
hope for the
Yeah,
kids.
there is hope. There's always hope.
So one of
So,
the things that
uh-huh,
one of the points that I really want to get out about that when you
mhm,
that and that you were stressing on it, right? So I think people need to really understand. There's this concept, right, of the pie, right? Okay,
mhm,
and the
mhm.
pie is a great thing, and it's a circle. But there's not been one pie that I've known of in history that's been cut equally, right? There's always cut, some slices are bigger than the others and all of that, right? But the pie makes up the pie, right?
Mhm,
And the slice makes up the pie by the way it fits into the pie, right? And
mhm.
as humans, what we really have to understand is that we can never be another slice of a pie, right? We're
Mhm.
our own slice of pie that fits into the pie,
Mhm.
right? That makes the pie. Otherwise, if you're trying to be another slice of the pie, it doesn't fit,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
And you're leaving your space blank
Right. Right.
that you
Right.
should occupy,
Oh, I
right?
agree with that. Yep.
Because
Yep.
we're all put on this earth to occupy our space as
Right.
a piece of this pie,
Right.
right? And what we do is we vacate our space all the time because we want to occupy somebody else's space or be that slice of pie. When really God has really given us some amazing ability to be our own slice of pie that
Right.
no one else in the world owns.
Right.
No one,
Right.
right? And it's so important that you know your slice of the pie, right?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point because I feel the same way. That God has given me whatever I need in life. I already have it. I'm not looking at someone who has a bigger slice of the pie. I'm not thinking about other people's privileges and what advantages that they have. I've just never thought that way. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast because there's so many messages out there that
Mhm.
have our children thinking that way. That it have to be equal and it's unfair and all that stuff. And I just never raised on that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I feel sorry for our children who's hearing this constantly every day because, like you, I have always felt I could be anything I wanted to be, and I think you feel the same way. Okay, so now you working at somewhere down the line in your career, Frederick. You transition from this technical guru to some type of management, project manager, or something like that. When did that transition occur? And was it a conscious decision? I know I made that conscious decision. Looking back on it, I wonder about it. But when did that happen? And do you ever have any regrets of moving away from the technology and technical? So when did you transition into the management type of person that you are now?
Great. That's a great question, and I got a great answer for that.
Hmm.
So, this was 1995. I was a manager. I was running First Set Computer Solutions, right? And
Hmm.
I built their technical department. We were doing a lot of technical solutions delivered, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I lived out in West Bloomington, right off of Highway 169. When
Hmm.
it was a two-way highway back in the day, right?
Hmm.
And so one day we were driving home. My wife and my two kids were driving home. Um, they're in the back. I see this car parked on the side of the road, right? So it turned out to be this little convertible MG, right?
Hmm.
And my wife's like, "Why are you stopping here?" Like, I see this car. It's a really nice car. I like this car. And my dream And my vision in life was always to have a convertible, and a nice little, hat, right, and riding with, wind blowing in my hair. That was
And
me, right?
Ray-Bans on,
Oh yeah,
probably.
just chilling, right? So I
Right.
saw this car and I'm like, wow. So anyway, I pull over. Just, I don't know, by the grace of God, I pulled over, got the number off the car, right? And this is how it took place, and this is an unbelievable story to track with, right? So I got the number for the guy. So my wife's like, "You can't get that car. It's not a family car. Blah blah blah." Like, hey, we got kids and stuff, right? That we're raising. Like, where's this car fit, right?
Hmm.
So,
She's
so
right too, by the way.
I
She
know
was right, but
she was totally right, right?
uh,
So what I did is I told her, well, I'm gonna check. I said, I'm gonna look at this car. If the car is, something that I want, I'll get a part-time job and pay for it. Like, I won't touch the family money, right?
good move.
Yeah. So anyway, I call the guy, go over to his house, and so we're talking. I mean, we're sitting there talking just like you and I are, and we're talking about our life, and we connected. He's very spiritual. I was very spiritual at the time, and still is, right? But just we connected on that level, and it was something about our connection at that time, right? So this is what he does. Honest to God, he goes, "Hey," he goes, "You want the car?" I go, "Yeah, but I can't afford that car, man. My wife already told me. I just wanted to, to see what it was about, how much, blah blah blah." He goes, "Do you want the car?" I go, "Yeah, I want the car." He goes, "Yours." He goes, "Pay me however you can, whenever you can," and gave me the keys. I never signed IOU or anything,
Wow.
right? And I
Hmm.
looked at him and I committed to pay him whatever I could per month, right?
Hmm.
And I ended up getting a part-time job. And then so my wife, who's very intuitive, right?
Hmm.
So I came home and told her all about this, right? Hey, you need to take me to get the car, blah, blah, blah. She goes, "He wants something from you." I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "He wants something from you." I go, "No, he doesn't." I go, just he's a nice guy, blah, blah, blah. Ha, ha. 8 months later, I ended up going to work with him,
Wow.
right? At a
Uh-huh.
company called JDL Technologies, right?
Uh-huh.
And at that time, we went back to that, and what he told me is that, man, what I saw in you is what we needed at our company to seal the deal with where we were going, right? And these guys were trying to start. They had started this company called JDL Technologies, right? And it was
Hmm.
when I got there, it was just a small group of people, right? And
Hmm.
so I brought that other component that they were looking for, um, and from there is history when I got into management and all that. And I met this guy who was the CEO of that company, JDL, and I give him kudos. His name was Thomas Lapping,
Hmm.
the greatest um, communicator of detail and structure around sales and sales component in history that I've met. The guy was just amazing at how he understood people and then regurgitate it back to them. And what he taught me, and what you see today, Lacey, is
Hmm.
he taught me how to listen to what people were saying to me and what they wanted versus what I knew and what I was proposing to them, right?
Right. Right.
And it made it very collaborative about how I learned how to take my technical ability and then move it into more of a management. And now today, as you're aware of, I develop large scale solutions for major corporations and stuff. But that was a lot of that that input that he put into me,
Hmm.
right, around those details. And along the way too, like even through First Tech and other companies, as you've experienced, there's been education components to this. I've learned a lot about management. I've learned a lot about supervising people. I've learned a lot about communicating with people. I've had, you get professional psychologists and psychiatrists at this level,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Their mental health is very important in this type of work, right? So it's not like, I just wake up and pray to God and move on. There's a lot of people in my life
Hmm.
that are my support network that make me whole.
That is a good input. Now, somewhere uh, after JDL or during JDL, I'm assuming that you ran into the Richburgs, both of our one of our favorite couples everywhere. They are just beautiful people. I hope to have them on my podcast. I'm sending this out to Joe by the Richburg so he can
I
hear
love
this.
Joe.
I
Right.
do too. They both great. Somewhere along the line, though, that you ran into the Richburg and came associated with their company. I think you ended up being vice president there. How did
Right.
that all come about? Where you were vice president at this black founded black computer company here in the Twin Cities?
Fantastic question. So, at JDL, we ended up growing JDL from like a few of us to 55 people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we ended up selling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we all had some stock into the company and all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we ended up, we closed this big deal. We did a lot of work and we wrote a lot of technology plans. We did, the U.S. Virgin Islands. We did Gary Community School Corporation. We also did the technology plan for Chicago Public Schools, right? So we wrote
Mm-hmm.
all of the infrastructure design and rollout and all of that stuff, right? So anyway, at my tenure at the end of JDL, we closed our last deal at JDL. I was roasted. I had did like 10 years travel straight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Leaving on Monday, coming home on Friday. So I ended up taking a year and a half off, right, of work,
Mm-hmm.
chilling.
Mm-hmm.
Whew. But anyway, so I ended up going back to work for a company called Sovereign, right, as
Mm-hmm.
a consultant. So I consulted with Sovereign around their sales and technology rollout and all that stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I go to Camphor United Methodist Church, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
That's where I'm churching at now. So
Right.
Dorothy started to go to Camphor Memorial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we developed a ministry around professionals at Camphor, right? So we were having ministry prayer groups and things like that, right? So anyway, in the prayer groups, we would all share, what our background is and all of that stuff, right? So I was sharing my background in there and talking about what I was doing and all this. So one Sunday, I'm coming in to go teach Sunday school, and Dorothy's like waiting on me, right? She's like, "Hey, Dorothy,"
That's
and this is
Dorothy.
the funniest thing ever. No, this is dead. I'm dead serious about this. Like I'm coming into church, and so she stops me. She goes, "Hey, I need to talk to you about my company, right? I need you. I need you in my company, right?" And I'm like, "What?" And so, and I entertained and talked to her about it. So, but on to this, and you talk about great people being in your life. So, Sue Rose and Lisa Loken, they owned Sovereign Technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they knew what all the work I had put into JDL and all this other stuff, and then they knew what I was in the market and what I was trying to do in my life. So when Dorothy and Joe came to me and wanted me to come to Keystone to run, that stuff, right? They were like, we want to check those people out. We don't know if they're good for you or not yet. You think I'm joking? We ended up we went to dinner downtown St. Paul. Lisa Loken, Sue Rose, Dorothy Richburg, Joe Richburg, and myself. And Lisa and Sue drilled them about me,
Ah.
which was a blessing, right? I mean, they
Right.
cared about me because I was going to make and I was very honest with them, right? That I was looking at this other company. I was going to do a transition from working with them to working with, and then they wanted to be involved, in my life at that level. So I just that's a beautiful story, and it all worked out. I ended up going over to Keystone, and we grew like gangbusters, and just did a lot in the world. We sure
Y-
did.
Yeah, and then and I should point out to the audience that you got involved in Dorothy and Joe of Keystone, the founders of Keystone Computer Solutions. Uh, all of you got involved in the Black Data Processing Association,
Yeah,
and I think you and I did quite a bit with that. I know you work with the Timberwolves and their diversity person over there, and you were working with the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
And what we're really getting into, Frederick, is that I just noticed that you had this network of business people and things that you were involved in. You were volunteering, and you always had energy. By the way, I mean, even when we, I mean, because some of those banquets and things it could get rather long, and we used to have some happy hours. But you always had that energy. Bottom line, though, how eventually did you get involved in the Black Data Processing Association?
Yep. So Dorothy and Joe are, they are pioneers for the Twin Cities area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they had always been on me about being involved, in that group, in that organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they wanted, my network and others to be involved, by far. So I actually ended up getting involved with the BDPA in 2006, 2005, right?
Mm-hmm.
And um, they were proponents of, building a program around African American kids being in technology, understanding, the hurdles, what they needed to do as kids to be prepared for the technology field as they go through their life. There's just a lot to this, as you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Around security, all of the things you can take risk on that will eliminate you from being in technology because of security background things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot. But anyway, so they had this great idea, and so they had to drag me into BDPA at first, right? Because I was ducking and dodging. And so I ended up getting involved in BDPA, and now I've been involved for a long time with them, and we've built some amazing programs for kids. And I just want to say kudos to you, Lacey, because you supported us when no one else would support us when you were at XL Energy and driving things there, right? You always stood up, you always showed up, you always made sure executives were at our events to greet kids, and you were there, which they saw another African American in technology and a leader in the community and stuff, right? So, kudos to you as well because those kids got to see you. But BDPA is now, we're growing like gangbusters now. We're averaging about 90 kids a year now that we're training. And not only training, but we're, providing internships and, all kinds of other things and programs for the children as well. It's been beautiful. Um,
Yeah. Well, I must say that you and Dorothy and Joe and everybody associated with BDPA, Michael, I forgot Michael's last name, but I
Michael
remember him.
Wolf. Michael
Wolf,
Wolf.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Michael Wolf and his wife, that you guys just set a good example. It kind of remind me of the days when I was growing up when these grown men expected for me to know how to do roofing. They expected for me
Yeah.
to know how to lay bricks, and so they just acted like I already knew how to do it. And you guys
Sure.
just set a good example and environment for me to fit in there.
Yeah.
So also the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce, if I recall correctly, you were involved. I don't know how much you're involved now that you were involved in that and trying to help that organization. How did you get involved with that? Were you representing Keystone Solutions there, or
Yep.
exactly what was your relationship with the Black Chamber of Commerce here in Minnesota?
Yep. So I was on the board of the Black Chamber of Commerce for several years, and our goal obviously was to support Black businesses in the state of Minnesota, right? So I
Right,
spent a lot of time with Leah Hargett as our
right.
leader.
Hmm.
Just an incredible woman
Yes, she
who,
is.
I mean, she gave way more of herself than she had, right, to others. And she was a great leader about helping transitioning businesses. So I was able to provide and my brain to the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce to build out where we are now. I think they're doing very well now, but we kind of built out the platform of communication, the businesses, and just holding up the value of the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce being an entity which represented Black businesses for the state of Minnesota, right?
Hmm.
So that was a very fulfilling time that I was there, and now I'm on so many different boards where I'm trying to help kids and people and turn their lives around. It's unbelievable.
I don't know how you fit it all in, to be honest with you. But before we go, and we have a few more minutes here, I want you to at least talk about your current situation with UpNet Technologies. I know
Yep,
you guys have got a lot of great things going over there.
yep,
You continue to grow, as I see.
yep,
Tell us a little bit about your current position at
yep,
UpNet Technology, and what do they do, and how do you fit into that whole picture,
yep.
Reggie?
Sure. So UpNet Technologies, which is an incredible company, we own our own data, our own data center. We deal a lot with privacy, security, all of that, right? But we do what we call EDI, electronic data interchange.
Hmm.
So we work with a lot of the big box companies, Target, Best Buy, Walmart. A lot of those guys, we do a lot of their back end data solutions. We probably do about 40 million data transactions a month with those entities, right? We have over 500 customers on that side. Uh, Back in 2012, I joined the company from Keystone, and we started to transition more into the supplier diversity, supplier relationship area. And so today, what we do is we do a lot of data movement for the super values, the 3Ms, all the different companies around the area. We do a lot of what we call supplier diversity tracking
Hmm.
for them, right? And we do all of the data tracking and supplier diversity tracking for the University of Minnesota as well. But what that means for the what that means is that we set up systems and solutions so that their suppliers and vendors and others can not only communicate with them with each other, but they're also visible to the university. They're also visible to the state of Minnesota. They're visible to other suppliers who are trying to find them in these databases. So what we've done at UpNet through our process of working with all these different companies, we've built about 30,000 vendors inside our database so that our clients now have access to search for service providers, balloons, you name it. They can
Right.
find these vendors in our database. So, again, from where we started in 2012 to where we are now, we have a total solution. It's called Smart Comp,
Hmm.
smart composition of data, right?
Hmm.
And what we can do is set up a system inside your company to be able to track POs, invoices, relationships with your suppliers, relationship with your contractors, and then we can also do project tracking to make sure that people are on time delivery, whether it be time measurement or financial measurement inside your company.
Wow. And I heard, and maybe you can speak briefly on this without revealing any trade secrets or confidentiality type things. But I heard you were involved with the Minnesota Vikings when they built the new stadium, and you helped them with some of their data crunching. But by the way, I was in charge of EDI at Excel Energy too, so I'm very
Right.
familiar with what you're doing there.
Yep.
But tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Minnesota Vikings and the Vikings Stadium, and
Sure.
what was the type of things that you did and are doing for them?
Well, that's amazing you asked that question because we just signed a new contract with the Minnesota Sports Facility Authority, which manages all the activities for the Minnesota Vikings, right? And
Hmm.
so, what we're doing for them, and you'll see this come out in the next month or so. We're just now building out a new registration page for them, and then
Hmm.
what we're doing, Lacey, is we're tracking all the spend that happens inside the stadium. So from
Hey,
anyone working in the stadium, anyone providing a service to the stadium, or any of those things, we're tracking all of that activity throughout
wow.
the stadium. So our technology is going across all of their entities to look at any type of activity that happens from a data or spend or money movement standpoint. So we have a lot going on with the stadium and the Minnesota Vikings, and we're very proud that they've chosen us as a minority vendor, right? And
Hmm.
they trust us, with all of their data and what they do, right? Because they are a great organization to work for. And what we're going to be doing, Lacey, just to add to that,
Hmm.
we're actually going to be starting to work with them on their DEI area as well, where we're going to be trying to help, illuminate some of the opportunities at the stadium as well You know,
Right.
to there's a lot going on at the Minnesota Sports Facility Authority, U.S. Bank Stadium, that we don't really know about, right? That we could be a part of. And I think once we educate people on the opportunities at the stadium, we'll start to get more participation from not only majority but minority-owned businesses as well.
So, as one techie who went into management to another, as one Southern, I call myself a country boy who evolved to another one, I just want to say that knowing you personally and professionally, I'm just proud of what you've done. And I can understand how you can sell things very well because you listen very well and you do care. And I just see that in you.
Right.
So we got a few more minutes here. I'm gonna have to do a schedule a second one with because I never get through everything. But
Yeah, but I just before you cut those minutes off, I want to say kudos to you, Lacey, because there's not another young man from Mississippi that would take or have the guts to do what you've done from a political standpoint as well as your professional level as well. I appreciate you as a friend and I appreciate you as a man because you have a big heart for what you're going after. And most people won't do things that are against the grain, and I
right, right,
see, you know what I mean?
yeah,
It's not comfortable.
and believe it or not, Frederick, I was able. Part of that courage was knowing I had friends and associates like you who would understand and support what I done. When you got someone backing you that you can count on, some quality people in your camp, that allows you to take risk and put up with the naysayers and comments from people who don't know you. So I really, you and Tony Williamson and the Richburg, I got frat brothers and everything that I've been out here on the wall with them. And so that's
Right.
what has allowed me to do that. So I really appreciate that. Uh, we talked about the messaging that our young people are getting. And I told you that we want to send out positive messages to them and the can do attitude and spirit that we were raised with, the self responsibility and accountability that we were raised with, and just the attitude that we can do anything we want to do. That's the focus of our program. So I'd like for you to maybe looking back over your life and the challenges and things and the obstacles and things that you had, leave the young people in our audience with something positive because uh, they're well. Let me put it this way: the adults that raised me kept the world very simple for me. There was God, there was the world, and there was you.
Right.
And the world was constant. God was constant. The only variable in this equation is you.
Right.
And so let's focus on you. So what can we tell our youth who, I mean, they hear so many messages that's focusing on the world and all the things are wrong with the world and all the bad people in the world. And that was never really a big deal for me because
Right.
I knew it boiled down to me and what I had to do. So what message would you want to leave with especially young people out there
Right.
who has and really helps to understand your purpose and have goals in life. But just give me a general Frederick Blockton message in life and
Yeah,
attitude and things like that. And let's leave our audience with that.
sure. One of the things I'll suggest, you know, anyone who's turned 60 should write a book for our younger generation so that they understand the real work it takes to become 60, right? And what young people need to understand, there's no trajectory in life that way. Life is like this.
Hmm.
Life goes all over the place, and you're gonna have ups and downs. But you know what? It's about your resurrection, right? And it's about what you want to do with your life to change who you are if you don't like who you are, or to be steady who you are and don't let others, dictate, who you are, because you do belong to somebody, and that's God, right? But other
Hmm.
than that, you don't have to really report to people or hold them as an intermediary, right? And people need to understand there is no intermediary when it comes to you and the power of you in this world. You don't need to ask anybody or get validation, but everything that you think you want to do, you can achieve. And the reason that it comes into your mind is because it's given to you to go after. So don't let people stop you from going after your dream because they're doing what they're doing. And you know what? You'll always get people, trying to get you to go left or right. But what you got to do is have enough knowledge. And I mean, if you're going to do something, read a book about it. Go on
Mm-hmm.
the internet and study about it. Do the research about it so that you have a full-fledged understanding of what you're trying to accomplish or where you're going. Don't let people just blurb you. Don't pick up the phone and call anybody and ask them. You do the research yourself. Then you can ask them and see what kind of feedback you may get from others. But it's really, I always like to tell my young people this, right? Wherever you go, there you are.
Right. Yeah.
And you know what? The operative word in it is you. And so if you end up in a place that you're not supposed to be in, it's because you did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
you have an opportunity, regardless of what you've done, regardless of where you are, to always do the things that you dream of doing. And don't let anybody ever distract you from that. I don't care what you've experienced or what you've gone through, you can always overcome it. And just keep in mind there's this thing called the resurrection. And you, as a human being, can resurrect. Every time you fail, you resurrect. Every time you fail, you resurrect. And the reason that you fail is so that you can resurrect to the next level, right? So
Mm-hmm.
resurrection is real in your life, and it continues. It's a continuation because it doesn't stop until the candle of nirvana is snuffed out.
Right, right. So, sound like you need to. I would promote you from Sunday school teacher to minister here, Frederick, based on that. And you're reminding me of a Teddy Pendergrass song called "You Can't Hide from Yourself."
Right,
Everywhere you go, there you are. And I've been trying to stress to everybody because I really appreciate the fact that the people that raised me had me focus on myself and
right.
not the world and everything else. So I appreciate that. This has been excellent, Frederick. You hit on a lot of the things that I like to hit on when I talk to our young people. You talked about the values that you were raised with. You talked about the importance of family and how important that is. You talked about faith and how that is a foundation of your life and it's a foundation of mine. And you talked about quality education. And those are the four pillars that I like to talk about. And I tell everyone, other people might have other solutions, but coming from where I came from during the era that I came up in, I know those things work.
Right.
And if anybody can tell me something else work, I'm willing to listen. But I know those things work, and I think we, as a community, once we get back to those things, we'll find out that we can address all these issues successfully. So I really appreciate that. Looking forward to seeing you. I gotta visit Camphor again. Is it Camphor?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
again and say hi to everybody. But I'm looking forward to getting together with you and perhaps we can get Tony up from Florida. I think he's one of them Florida winter birds down there in Florida, and maybe the three of us can get together like old time's sakes and plot some strategy for 2022. Okay, so say hello to your family for me,
You do the same, brother.
Jolene and the girls. And I understand there's a wedding coming up. You're
Yeah.
marrying one of your daughters off. I hope. Are they still giving dowries? Do you have to give a dowry?
Hey,
Do you have to pay for
hey,
everything, Fred?
let me reach out to your people. I just need, I might have to have a GoFundMe.
GoFundMe. Congratulations
Hey,
on
thank you so
your
much, man.
pending
I
wedding,
appreciate you,
and thank
Lacey.
you very much.
Thanks for having
Also,
me on. Yeah.
and just some great vibes and stuff. So looking forward to seeing you later on this month.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you,
Thank
brother
you so much.
Frederick.
Hey,
Thanks
talk
for
soon.
coming.
See
Okay,
you. See ya.
see ya. All right. Uh, thanks, everyone. That was a great interview with Mr. Frederick Blockton. And once again, to show you the type of values and things that we have to be successful, that it doesn't depend on the world and what other people think of us and whether they think they're supreme or whether they got privileges or anything. It depends on us, our attitude and our perspective and the way we react to things and the godliness and faithfulness in our lives. That's my message to our young people out there. You can be anything you want to be. And if you don't think so, drop me a line and tell me why you can't be, and I'll show you how and why you're wrong about that. Once again, another episode of Bright Lights. Go out to LaceyJohnson.com. Go out and subscribe. Go out and hit the bell for notification. Support us 100% online store. And we will see you back here next week with another achiever like Mr. Blockton who will tell you their story and what we need to do to get where we want to go. Have a great evening, everybody, from Bright Lights. Bye.